Okay, so good morning, everybody. It is October 2nd, 2024, and my name is Jana Hexter. I work for the Northeast IPM Center. We're based at Cornell University, but we cover the whole Northeast. And I am delighted to welcome Hilary Peterson and Amara Dunn-Silver, and they're going to be talking about increasing access to practical biocontrol information through digital resources. So I'm sure it'll be wonderful. Next slide, please. So there is a live transcription available. If you select that option on your screen, you should be able to see a live transcription. This is being recorded, and it will be up on our website in about a week at that link, but you don't need to bother about writing that link down, because if you are registered, I will send you a copy of the recording when it's done. And that will also include Q&A answers if there are any to put in there. Next slide, please. We have a lot of people registered today, and I expect lots of questions. To make it easier to answer those questions, if you can use the Q&A feature rather than the chat, it's easier for me to keep track of things. So if you're not familiar with that, if you bring up the toolbar that is at the bottom of your screen on Zoom, if you just move your mouse, it should pop up. And there's a box with a question mark in it and Q&A. If you click on that, you can ask your question. Feel free to ask anonymously if you prefer, or you can put your name in there. Next slide, please. Our two presenters are Amara Dunn-Silver. She's with the New York State Integrated Pest Management Program, which is part of Cornell College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. She supports the effective use of biocontrol solutions for pests in all agricultural commodities, as well as pests encountered by New Yorkers where they live, work, play, and learn. Welcome, Amara. And Hilary Peterson is the Integrated Pest Management Specialist at the Maine Department of Agriculture, Conservation and Forestry Plant Health Programs. And Hilary is responsible for IPM education and implementation across the state, including pests affecting structures like schools, homes, restaurants, agriculture, invasive species, and more. So welcome, Hilary. All right, so we have a few questions for you before we begin. And you should see a poll pop up on your screen, and with 3 questions, and we'd like you to answer those. Gives us a good idea of who is on the call and the level of expertise. And I'll be quiet while you do that. All right, I am going to end the poll and share the data. So we have a 43% are extension educators, and 30% are government employees, and 13% are growers. So actually, we have a really good mix of researchers and consultants and growers and government employees and other. And then I won't show the details of the favorite. Well, maybe I can do this. Hold on, I can share the results. Sorry. View the details. I don't know. Oh no, I don't think I can share that with you. We'll have to maybe share that later with the presenters. With that, we'll move on with the presentation. And Amara, if you can move to the next screen. And next screen. There we go. And I'll turn it over to you, Amara.
All right, thank you. Just moving polling windows out of the way. Thank you for that introduction, Jana. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you also to Hilary, my co-presenter. So we're going to tag team this. I'm going to talk about one digital resource on biocontrol, and then Hilary is going to talk about a different resource, and we'll have time for questions in between. And as Jana indicated, if at any point questions come up for you while we're talking, feel free to use the Q&A feature to put those questions in. All right. So Where today's story starts, at least with this biocontrol website, which is the piece that I'm talking about. Some of you folks, especially entomologists, may be familiar with this website here that I'm showing a screenshot of. It's called Biological Control, A Guide to Natural Enemies in North America. And it was originally created by Tony Shelton. And it's my understanding that the beginning of the process of getting this website online was actually in 1994. So it's been about 30 years since this process started. It has been widely recognized as a go-to resource on biological control with both detailed information about biocontrol agents. They divided them up into parasitoids, pathogens, predators, and weed feeders, and also just more general information about biocontrol. So it's a great resource. And a few years ago, when Tony was getting ready to retire, he came to the New York State IPM program and to myself as the biocontrol specialist and was hoping that we would be willing to take over the management and ongoing updating of the website. And we said yes. So this is a process that has been ongoing for quite a few years. And I'll be sharing, it is not done yet, but I'll be sharing, we've kind of reached an important milestone, so I'll be talking about that today. All right, so my goals in this process of taking over the website were, first of all, we needed to migrate it to the New York State IPM website, just so that we could physically do the updates and do the maintenance that was required. Since we were going to be doing that migration anyway, it seemed like a good time to step back and think about how is the site being used? How could it be used better? How could it be made more useful and more usable and more accessible in that process? And a piece of that is definitely improving the accessibility. So the old website doesn't meet current standards for online accessibility. And also it's not mobile compatible. So we wanted to make sure that as we're doing this migration and revamping of the website, that we make it accessible to people in the ways that they're currently accessing information online. To look at how we might further improve the usefulness and usability just beyond accessibility concerns, I received some funding from the Northeastern IPM Center to talk to folks who are using it. So I did some focus groups from around the Northeast and got some input on what do you like about the site, where are some places we could improve it, how could it be more useful to you? And then my third goal was to create and add some new content. So I gave a talk in this series or a similar series last fall and talked about some of the new content that I've created. Today, what I want to do is focus on the biocontrol agent profiles, which were a really big part of the old website and where we are with moving those over to the new website and updating them. So this is an example of a screenshot of one of the biocontrol agent profiles on the old website. So a big part of the website were individual pages for individual biocontrol agents. Some of them were individual species, if it was one species that does a specific thing, or groups of species. In this case, this page that I'm showing you is about syrphid flies. The ways that this was organized was you would go to types of natural enemies and you'd say, okay, I'm interested in predators. And then there'd be this predator table of contents and you picked your predator that you were interested in. So it definitely had an entomological slant to it, focus on, we want to be clear about orders and which is important, definitely important. There was a lot of text on the old profiles. There were some pictures, the number of pictures kind of varied from profile to profile. And also we realized that some of the articles were so old that the pictures were a great resolution on the screens that we were using at the time the article was written, but now they looked blurry because our screens have gotten so much better. So some of the feedback we got was less text, people want to get to their answers quicker, more pictures, and a real focus on practical information for how we would use this biocontrol agent. So this is kind of a fun story about some early success that we're seeing with the website. So a few weeks ago, our web designer, Jody Benedict at New York State IPM, sent us some messages and said, oh my goodness, we're famous on Reddit. So it turns out that someone had seen these insects fly out of pepperoni at a Subway. I don't know what that says about the pepperoni at this particular Subway location. They couldn't get a photo, but they drew this picture, this diagram of an insect, and they're pointing out, well, it had really big eyes, it had one set of wings. The thorax, they said, was really thin. They thought they saw a stinger and it was pulsing, but it was smaller than a hornet or a paper wasp. And they posted it in the What's This Bug piece of Reddit. I'm not sure of the technical term for that. But they said, I couldn't get a picture. Here's my drawing. And somebody saw this and responded and said, oh, I think it might be a hoverfly because of the big eyes. Now, we know hoverflies don't have stingers. I don't know what the insect actually was, but the person who responded asked if it looked like pictures that we have on the new biocontrol agent profile for syrphid flies at this website that we're updating, and referring the people who visit, who saw this post, who saw the drawing, to go to the website and see if it looked like that. I did not see any comments to see if the person who reported the insect actually said, oh yeah, this is what it was, but it did drive a lot of traffic to this website. So on September 8th, we had nearly 10,000 page views for the hoverfly page at the new website. And so this is a screenshot of what the top of that page looks like. You can see there's a big focus on getting some images up front, breaking up the text. We start with just really simple in a sentence or two, what is this biocontrol agent? And then try to pull out information that people want to know and treat it kind of like a frequently asked questions page. What pests are targeted, what stage of the pest. All right, so I thought that the most helpful thing would actually be to take you on a tour of the website. If you'd like to follow along on your own computer, there's a QR code. You can take a picture. This is the long link. This is the short link, and I'm sure that we could share those in a follow-up email if folks would like to see them too. So, oh, wonderful. It's always exciting when your windows behave the way you think. So we're going to go to this new page and take a look. This is the landing page for the biocontrol website. And last year when I spoke, I talked about some of the new resources I created and how do I use biocontrol. We also have a lot of this information in the biology behind biocontrol was moved over from the old website. There was a lot of good content there. And some of it's highlighted on this homepage, things like what are the different types of biocontrol? Conservation, classical, augmentative. What do those terms mean so that people can learn about that? And the piece I want to focus on today is the biocontrol agents. So we're going to go here. One of the concerns about the way that the old website was organized was that you had to know what type of biocontrol agent it was in order to get more information about it. And people said, really, when we're looking for biocontrol agents, we're more likely to be starting with what is the pest that I'm trying to target. We are still working and hoping that we can get some better ways to have multiple options for searching and getting to the biocontrol content you need. For right now, your options are, you can still look at, okay, is it a parasitoid, a predator, an insect-killing nematode, a weed feeder, or a biopesticide? But you can also look at it from the standpoint of what pests am I targeting? Am I targeting insects? Am I targeting weeds? We will have some plant disease targets up there at some point in the future. They're not ready yet. So let's take a look at one of the examples for weeds. So here we have the Japanese knotweed psyllid, which is a potential biocontrol agent for Japanese knotweed. And again, as I mentioned before, one or two sentences, what is this biocontrol agent? Trying to pull information into bite-sized pieces so it's easier for people to digest. A lot of some of the information people most want to know up front is, does it work? Understandably, they want to know, does it work? So we've highlighted a little summary of that. Where should I use it? There's more information about the biocontrol agent, both some sentences describing it and some answers to basic questions, because we found a lot of people were interested in, well, is it native or not? There was concern, I want to use a biocontrol agent, I want to know if it's native or not. What region of the of North America can it be found in? Is it already established, or is it something that I would have to release? We try to have as many pictures as we can, because that's more engaging for people and also will help them recognize insects better. But then also we wanted to maintain, the old website had a lot of good details. And one of my favorite comments from the focus group was, there's actually really good information here if you look for it. And so we wanted to keep all that good information while also packaging it in a way that doesn't make someone's eyes glaze over. So we have those more details that might be of interest to a scientist or to someone who wants to dig a little bit deeper. There's information about how to use the biocontrol agent, what pest stage it targets, what its mode of action is, if there's particular times when it's best to use. There's some information about the pest as well. And again, you can dig deeper if you're someone who would like to dig deeper. So I also wanted to show you an example of an insect biocontrol agent. So I'm going to take you to the Hoverfly page, which we saw a preview of before. And it's a very similar format for all of the biocontrol agents. So this is one of the pieces that I think will make it a little bit easier to write more of these profiles. Is there's basically a set of questions that we want to answer about every biocontrol agent. Not every question applies to every biocontrol agent because we're covering things that control weeds, things that control insects, things that control plant diseases. But they're all organized the same way, so people will be able to find the same information in the same places. Oh, I haven't checked out this video, but now I'm intrigued. More pictures of hoverflies. In some cases, we have life cycles, if that seemed relevant, or to give people more images of what the different life stages look like. For this organism, there was some more information about how to use them. It varies a lot from organism to organism. Because this is a generalist biocontrol agent, it's sort of a mixture of some of the pests, but not all of the pests that can be targeted by the biocontrol agent. And then here we have these learn more details, some of the things that might be more of interest to entomologists. I wanted to highlight on this article, so Lydia Commandi took charge of editing the old article, adding some more information, getting it ready to put up on the website. At the time, she was a PhD student at Cornell. And that will actually figure into one of my future slides. All right, so we're gonna go back to, There we go. Is everyone seeing my slides again?
Yes.
Okay, good. So always you never quite know how Zoom is going to transition. All right, so what's next? So far, we have 42 articles about biocontrol agents that are up on the website, and I am really appreciative of all of the authors who have written new content or who have revised existing content. This project would not be possible without them. But there are also a lot more articles that need to be migrated from the old site, and also some biocontrol agents that weren't even on our radar the last time the old site was updated, and we need articles about those as well. And so if you are someone who knows about a biocontrol agent, or you know someone who knows about a biocontrol agent, I would love to hear from you and have you write a guest, be a guest author and write one of these profiles. They are super simple to write. I have a whole template. You just fill in the template. There's instructions about exactly what types of pictures that you need. Feel free to nominate yourself or someone else. And as I mentioned, I've had graduate students write articles. This can be a great opportunity for a graduate student or a postdoc to get some experience with some extension writing. So please send me an email if you or someone you know would be a great fit for an author for these other articles. And with that, I will take questions.
Great. We have 2 questions. Actually, it was a question that I had because I noticed with the Japanese knotweed, it said it wasn't commercially available. And someone has asked, if the biocontrol is not commercially available, does the website explain how to either encourage the biocontrol's presence or obtain it non-commercially?
That's a good question. definitely when available, there's the articles have information about conserving or encouraging the biocontrol agent. So there is one of the fields is conservation, and that might be things like how do you create good habitat for hoverflies? There's also another field, compatibility, where when available, we can provide information about the compatibility of biocontrol agents with either pesticides or with other biocontrol agents. And both of those things I think are related to how do I create good habitat? How do I encourage this biocontrol agent? We certainly don't want to recommend or give people information on the website about how they might move insects around that they're not supposed to be moving around. So sometimes organisms that are not commercially available, you it's not a good idea. And in some cases, I don't think it's legal to just move insects from one state to another without some permits and some oversight for that. So we don't want to encourage things that are either ecologically harmful or in fact illegal, for sure.
Thank you. A question from Gary Phelps is, do you offer DEC pesticides credits for this presentation? I guess that's probably a question for us, actually. I don't know the answer to that, Gary, so we can look into it and I can get back to you. Maybe if you want to email me afterwards, and we'll look into what that would entail. So. All right, looks like there are no other questions for now. So I think we should move along with the presentation. There's also a chance to ask more questions later on. So if something pops up while Hilary is speaking that's occurred to you from Amara's presentation, we can circle back around to it. So with that, we'll move on to Hilary's presentation.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you, Amara. I'm so excited about that resource. So I'm going to be talking to you today about our Augmentative Biocontrol Working Group, which is, if you remember when Amara was showing the websites, there's a few different types of biocontrol. You have classical and conservation, and then augmentative biocontrol, which is essentially when you purchase from a company the biocontrol agents and essentially release them as a pesticide, which sounds funny, but you're really managing them in that way. And specifically, we're talking about augmentative biocontrol in greenhouses. And so if you aren't one of the people that actually said you were a grower, imagine you're a grower interested in using biocontrol. And again, maybe you are, maybe that's why you're here today. Next. So you've heard that it can save you a lot of money. But when you start digging around online, it actually looks kind of expensive. Next. There you go. And then, as you're looking around, trying to figure out how to use it, looking around online, you find lots of different websites. Some are companies talking about the different biocontrol agents and what they cost and what to use them for. Some might be Amara's website that gives some really good information about what it is. But it's just really hard to piece that all together, especially when you're not even actually 100% sure which pest species you're dealing with. Next. You even find some webinars and take some time to watch them. You kind of grasp the concept and different definitions of biocontrol. You're looking through photos, but you just feel really overwhelmed because you don't know where to begin. Next. You might spend a whole day or a whole month off and on trying to figure out and outline a plan for your specific needs at your facility, but you just end up feeling overwhelmed and you're frustrated. You can't figure out what exactly to do for your situation. Next. And so our goal is to make that plan, make that broad outline for growers. We want to make it free and we want to make it easy for anyone to use. Next. And so I put in a grant for this augmentative biocontrol working group 2 years ago. Broadly from an experience I had myself, I finished up my PhD in entomology, and while trying to figure out what to do for work, I had the opportunity to set up IPM program for organic cannabis grower here in Maine. And I was really excited about biocontrol. A lot of my PhD work had to do with classical biocontrol. And I was like, I'm going to get biocontrol set up here. And then I started looking around online and I was like, where do I even start? So then I came into this role at the state of Maine, and we have an integrated pest management council. And Caleb Goosen from the Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association also talked about struggles he was seeing growers have that wanted to implement, and either they couldn't figure it out or it was too expensive. Conversations I also had with Bug Lady Consulting, Suzanne Wainwright Evans. And as I said, my experience setting up an IPM program, trying to educate the public and growers, like at my greenhouse pest management practices workshop every year. And also just thinking about conversations that I've had over time working with different entomologists, knowing that, next slide, all of you out there that have anything to do with extension or entomology, I know that you have your personal bookmark library on your browser of your favorite links, your favorite places to go, your favorite books. We all have our own personal library of resources, experience, and networks. And so when I started thinking about putting together a resource about augmentative biocontrol, I really didn't want to do it alone. I wanted to do it with people that have experiences from lots of different pieces of augmentative biocontrol across the board to get those pieces all together in one place. Next. And so there are a few objectives of this working group. The first, which was kind of done, is to establish an augmentative biocontrol working group for the Northeast region. We wanted to pull together researchers, educators, practitioners involved with biocontrol, both, well, originally for indoor and outdoor, but we kind of narrowed it down to indoor. Next. And so I was able to get folks from 8 different states in Washington, D.C. to join. And you can see on the right a bunch of different institutions and businesses and government folks all come together in this working group. Next. And you, I'm always welcoming new members. Feel free, my email will be somewhere probably at the end of this presentation. Please feel free to email me. Anyone's welcome to join at any time. Next. So our second and probably biggest objective that we're working on still right now is, as I mentioned, I really just wanted to gather as many available resources that growers might find across the internet, maybe that wasn't online, that could be digitized, or even to create some new information if there was some big gaps, to just put that all in one place that was easy to find. Next. And then with all that information, the original goal of the grant was to create a website for growers to use to access this information and ensure that growers know about it through outreach by the working group members. Next. And so as we started talking about what this would look like, as we started talking about what this would look like, I was having kind of a hard time thinking about how to organize things in a way that makes sense. And I happened to be in a presentation about something completely unrelated and heard about these stages of behavior change. And so as we were discussing things, I started to organize them, thinking of different growers that might exist sort of along these kind of steps here. So starting from unaware of the problem, pre-contemplation, maybe growers that had never heard anything about augmentative biocontrol before, contemplation, being aware of the problem, but they maybe want to try augmentative biocontrol, but they still really aren't sure what to expect. And then all the way through maintenance, even the growers who are truly seasoned using biocontrol, but still wants to sustain those behaviors and do even more. Next. And so I started out with the working group explaining all these objectives to everyone in the first meeting. And I had a giant Word document that I started in, and I was frantically going through trying to take down notes. One of the big goals of this working group for me was to have each meeting just be an active work meeting. I just wanted to be a facilitator to gather information as everybody was talking. And the giant Word document was really challenging. So I kind of took a step back and started thinking. And you can see here in the background, this is actually the planner feature that is in Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Planner. And I discovered that you can basically kind of hack it and use it instead as sort of a big bulletin board. So if you look there, you could imagine that each of those cards is like a sticky note that you can open up and keep notes in. And so I had everybody in this Microsoft team. We would meet monthly, and I made these cards organized like those stages of behavior change. And so this helped us to just sort of think about different stages that a grower might be in, and at those points, what pieces they might need to really start thinking about in order to use augmentative biocontrol. Next slide. So each month we would look at these cards. I would go through at the beginning of the meeting and kind of see what areas needed a lot more discussion. And then I would basically just say, who has something to say about taxonomy resources? And then as people talked, I took notes. And then I was also able to, if you see all the little dots on there, I was also able to sort of assign people these cards, which to me indicated who was talking the most, means that they're kind of a specialist in that area and the person to reach out to with further question. And then between each meeting, I organized these, sort of consolidated them, reached out to the people that talked a lot for further resources that they mentioned. And so I just used the system for, I don't know, like a year and a half, and finally kind of got to a point that conversation was slowing down. Next slide. Oh, and this is just a picture here of what it looks like when you open one of those cards. And the coolest thing about this is you can actually export it onto Excel. So you get like all of that information just in one document. Next slide. And then Amara and me and Deb started chatting about a really exciting idea that instead of this working group actually making our own separate website, of maybe this information actually being hosted on the website that Amara just talked about. Next. And so at that point, I paused and had a meeting with Deb and Amara and the website folks at Cornell, who were fantastic. And we talked about a lot of the specifics that they use when building the site and the different sort of pieces that will work well for people, like Amara talked about, not overwhelming people with tons of blocks of text, having bullet points, having resources. And so I took some time and translated all the information we had into this big 32-page and counting document that's called a website content model. And at this point, we are still meeting once a month as a working group and sort of picking a section of this and just filling it out the best we can. Next slide. And so I talked about those steps before, the behavior change steps. And through that process, we've sort of determined 7 different kind of steps that a grower could potentially land on for how ready they are to use augmentative biocontrol, which is what each page of the website will be like. So the idea is that the grower will come to the website, have a brief overview of using augmentative biocontrol, and then they'll be able to kind of have a collapsed page where they can figure out on a sliding scale where they are in readiness, and then open it and start reading through the resources from there. And so going from beginning, nothing to lots of different, having lots of experience already, folks starting at step 1 would take a step back and assess their current pest management program and needs. Then they need to learn to sort of manage the expectations of augmentative biocontrol, knowing that it's not a silver bullet and it's complicated, but it's great. Then once they sort of had that groundwork laid, they could really start to build their augmentative biocontrol toolbox and network, and then start preparing their facility and their staff, and then start small in one crop, slowly expand, and then always, as an IPM person, I always have to say, review and improve those systems annually. So I don't have time to dig into all of these steps, but I just have a few highlighted in the next few slides. Next. So the first step, assessing your current pest management program and needs, this is really important before even thinking about augmentative biocontrol as something that you use, because you really need to have a solid integrated pest management program in your facility to use augmentative biocontrol, especially including scouting regularly and systematically, and taking good records of what's going on and reviewing them as a team, thinking about what communication looks like through the facility, and actually knowing the species of pests that the grower is dealing with, and then knowing if those species are compatible with biocontrol and how to find identification help and resources. Next. Step 3 is building the augmentative biocontrol toolbox and network. This conversation was so interesting because there were so many pieces I really never thought of. First of all, building a network with other growers who use augmentative biocontrol. We had a lot of discussion on that and even wondered if we need to facilitate a network, maybe some kind of new program or network of growers who can meet each other. We are planning on having at least a few success stories right at the top of this website, so that'll at least be some grower examples. Building relationship with suppliers. We're working on a worksheet PDF that will be available on the website that folks could print out that kind of walks them through all the pieces of when they call and talk to a supplier, essentially an interview for that supplier. That relationship is so important for growers. Developing SOPs for their staff, and then even that physical augmentative biocontrol toolbox. So sticky cards, clipboards, hand lenses, microscopes, fanny packs, soft touch forceps. And even some folks in our working group have done this themselves in the past and have some really cool information about DIY, creating your own rearing containers, and budget discussions. Next. Step 4, preparing your facility and staff. It's important to really realize that this is such an important piece because communication has to happen when you're using something like augmentative biocontrol. So, perhaps preparing a weekly schedule that incorporates the new related tasks and really understanding the time it's going to take for those tasks to be done properly. So the time that goes into scouting, making sure that you know when the biocontrols are going to come in the mail and knowing that you need to process them right away, backup plans for staff when shipments get delayed, knowing how to do quality control assessments of those shipments, and how to and when to release biocontrols, do troubleshooting, and before you actually purchase them, getting the equipment and doing some practice rounds of different deployment methods. Next. And so for this work group, some of our next steps, it says 1, 2, 1, 2. It's supposed to say 1, 2, 3, 4. I think PowerPoint just did something strange there. It's finishing out this website content model to a place that we really feel that it would be ready to go online. We then want to host a virtual meeting with experienced augmentative biocontrol growers, so growers that have done this for a long time, to walk through it with them and gain insights from them on where we're getting it right, maybe where we're missing some more information, things like that. And then sort of the dream down the road that would be really great would be to apply for funds to actually host a larger in-person conference, to really fully develop these materials, present on them, get recordings of those presentations to put on the website, do interviews with growers, put on the website, things like that. And then finally, to get this information, get funding to get this information put up on that biocontrol website. Next. And so that's all I have. I'll take any questions and thank you for your time.
Great, thank you very much, Hilary. It's interesting hearing how it's progressed. So I have a couple of questions that are in the chat, and if people do have questions, if you can put them in the Q&A for me, it makes it a lot easier for me to find them. So Cesarina Cora said, so the list of biocontrol agents in the website are only naturally occurring, not introduced from other areas or outside the US. If introduced, which is the federal authority to approve their release?
So actually, we have biocontrol agents that are both naturally occurring and that have been introduced. So for example, the psyllid that was feeding on Japanese knotweed is something that that was found in the native range of Japanese knotweed, that when we do classical biocontrol, it's pretty common to look for a predator or a parasitoid from the invasive pests native range. So that's why we have the information about, is it native, is it not native? And sometimes in the about sections, there'll be information about where it was introduced from or when it was introduced. As far as authority for approving releases, that would happen through the USDA, I believe. in the US. I don't know anything, I assume there's similar regulatory procedures for Canada and for Mexico. The original biocontrol website that Tony Shelton created was supposed to be for all of North America, and so I'm trying to retain that as well. It is a very long and complicated process to get approval to release an organism that is not native. It takes many years, and there's a lot of careful testing, and for good reason.
Great, thank you. And Wendy McFadden asked, is there any information on how to promote the biocontrol naturally?
I think that that would probably be found under conservation or compatibility. What can I do to make a space more friendly to this biocontrol agent? In some cases, that information is also in places like the setting, like where should I use it? Where should I release it? And we try to provide people information about where is this biocontrol likely to be most effective, right? So that you're not trying to use a biocontrol agent that really likes it humid, but it's in a hot, dry spot, that sort of thing.
And then Cora has asked, are there apps that help users recognize specific biocontrol agent species associated with certain pests and quickly assess their abundance to enable them to make informed decisions about sprays, to avoid negative impact on the beneficials, and ensure that growers can rely on these biocontrol agents for pest management?
Do you know of anything, Hillary? That sounds like an amazing app.
Yeah, so I think that you can cobble together that across a few different apps. One of the things we actually have talked about in this biocontrol working group a few times, though, is there's a couple of things about apps. First of all, when it's coming to using an app to identify something, you want to be really careful, especially if you're talking something really teeny tiny. I mean, I have an iPhone and I've been really impressed lately with, you can take a picture of an insect now and a little button pops up and it'll give you an ID. And if it's a big characteristic insect, like a big butterfly or a hoverfly, it can probably get you to, super family or group or order. But a lot of times when it comes down to these things, we're talking about different species of thrips. And at that point, you really need to have a proper key and work with a specialist to help you figure out that species. Because I'm even learning through making this website and this information is that there are certain species of thrips that can and cannot really be controlled with biocontrol. So, talking about ID resources, in each state, typically Extension will have a resource. Here in Maine, we have a lab that you can send things to. Sometimes things are for a fee, sometimes they're not. We're going to have sort of a how-to guide on the website for finding resources. That's one piece. We're trying to use less links. So instead of trying to pull together a link for all 50 states and Canada, Mexico, of all the different ID labs, teaching people how to find that online instead. And then let me think. The other thing with apps is when we're talking about something that comprehensive, there are some apps out there for scouting. You can find them. I know a few different companies that do exist, and depending on how big or how valuable your crop is, it may be worth the investment of using that app. But I'm a total tech geek, and I think that a lot of things can be done at a lot less of a price first to figure out what works for you. So for example, when I worked at that cannabis place and I was trying to figure out an inexpensive way to kind of keep scouting things together, I developed just a Google form for submitting photos and printed out a QR code of that form and taped it in each of the rooms so people could scan it with their phone and type what they were seeing, and I could have all that information. So that's where kind of working with an extension person for that sort of idea of a comprehensive thing could help.
One of my coworkers, Betsy Lamb, did work on creating an app called Greenhouse Scout. And the goal is to have in one place some tools to help you scout for pests and beneficials in a greenhouse. There's images of the pests, there's images of the beneficials, they're cross-linked. So if you figure out, oh, I have this pest, okay, what are the natural enemies that you can use? The caveats with that are it's not free. It's currently in the process of being updated, and my understanding is that if you buy it now, you'll have to pay again when it gets updated. And also it's just for greenhouse settings. And I don't think I think it would be very difficult to quickly assess populations of pests or biocontrol agents with an app. I know folks are looking at, all sorts of ways that we can get better images of crops and more quickly assess things like pest damage. I don't think there's something that's all the way there yet.
Mm-mm.
Great, thank you very much. I think that's all the questions that we have. So I think we will move on to the next slide, please. So we have a couple of poll questions as we did in the beginning. And so you should see a screen pop up with those poll questions. There it is. And I'll give you a few minutes because there's a few more questions this time around. And we really appreciate you taking the time to do this. Okay, there we go. So someone had a suggestion. So we'll follow up with the folks who have suggestions, and for advertising and development, and ideas of some resources. We'll follow up with you, and most people are highly likely to use their website when it's fully functional, and to recommend the website, and then also, and how likely are you to increase your implementation of IPM after this webinar? And we see lots of very likelies and extremely likelies, which is wonderful for us. So thank you very much for taking the time to answer that. And I know that Hilary and Amara will follow up with folks who have suggestions. So next slide, please. So we have some webinars coming up. We have a DEIJ and IPM panel discussion at the end of this month. We have one on bee breeding and IPM for better pollinator health at the end of November. We have another webinar on weather apps. It's going to be in February. And I'm also scheduling a couple of more toolboxes for this spring. So keep your ears out and eyes out for new webinars that are being scheduled. One is actually going to be on developing PMSP or crop profile. We just haven't settled fully on the date for that yet. And next slide, please. So if you are interested in connecting with colleagues who are interested in biocontrols, a great way of doing that is to post a profile about yourself on this link. And you can also go and find people like Hilary and Amara at our Find Our Colleagues site. It's a great way of networking across the Northeast. I also don't have a slide for this, but want to mention to you that our RFA is out this fall. We actually released it last week, but we're going to re-release it with some changes. So if you're interested in applying for a grant from us, the deadline is going to be sometime in November, and keep your eyes out for that. So next slide, please. Recording of this is going to be available at this link, and you can watch it as often as you like. And I will also send you a link to it. It usually takes us about a week because we do a little bit of editing before and putting it on our website. So probably by this time next week, we should have a link to send to you. And next slide, please. I want to acknowledge that the Northeastern IPM Center is based at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. And Cornell University is located on the traditional homelands of the Gayokono, the Cayuga Nation. The Gayokono are members of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, an alliance of 6 sovereign nations with a historic and contemporary presence on this land. The Confederacy precedes the establishment of Cornell University, New York State, and the United States of America. We acknowledge the painful history of Gayokono dispossession and honor the ongoing connection of Gayokono people to the past, present, and to these lands and waters. This land acknowledgement has been reviewed and approved by the traditional Gayokono leadership. And the next slide, please. We also want to thank our funders, USDA NIFR, who have given us a grant that allowed us to make sub-awards to actually both Hilary and Amara to do the work that they've just presented on. So these are small awards, but they can bring mighty results when used well. So I want to thank Hilary and Amara for your expertise and your diligence and your hard work and your willingness to share it with the community today. And thank you to all the people who've attended and your great questions and your interaction. I very much appreciate it. And with that, I will declare the webinar complete. And thank you. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day wherever you are. Okay, bye-bye.